Also, Carl, you did, I think you are with us for more than 2 years, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
maybe even
that's
3
right.
or so.
Yeah.
You did quite a lot of tweakings around the
Yes.
speakers. And maybe
Yes.
share with us a little bit of your end results, or your conclusions about it.
Well, it's a bit, can be a bit confusing, I think, for any of us to keep adding the kind of components somewhere that keep making things more realistic. So, for example, a good tube unit for sure is holographic. And it's kind of fun to listen to the holography because of the dimension. I have found different tube units, for example, to be much more satisfactory than anything transistor I've tried because it's just not as flat or two-dimensional. And so there's the realism there. Then if somebody chooses the right equipment, they get a certain kind of extension or a certain kind of fullness in the mid-range. I'm not particularly prone to the 300B sound. It's probably a little too syrupy for me, generally speaking. But the EL34 sounds a little different. So does the KT88 and the KT120 and the 6L6. And so somebody would be familiar with the character traits of those tubes and then put into a decent circuit with very good passive parts, maximizing the design. And you keep getting a little closer to your nirvana, your little destiny with the treat of musical sound. So yes, I have messed with wires, capacitors, resistors, tube amps. I've had one rebuilt with the best parts, and luckily it turned out great. I've messed around with power cords. It just goes on and on. I don't think anybody would want to be my psychoanalyst right now because it just goes on and on.
So, yeah, well, that's great. But you ended up with Clarity Cap.
I ended up with a Clarity Cap CSA, which is very delineated and clear and linear, and bypassed with a Jupiter foil and wax cap, which added a lot of body and a lot of embodied realism. The Clarity Cap without that bypass cap doesn't work nearly as well. The Clarity Cap with that bypass cap is substantially different. And so I certainly did not realize you could have so much influence with a bypass approach. And in this particular case, I bypassed not with a 0.01 or 0.1, I bypassed with a 1.
Okay.
So it probably barely maybe resculpts the frequency slightly, but there's something that I read about that particular cap compared to others of their caps that these professional listeners liked a lot. And so I said, okay, I'll trust so many years of their listening. So that's what I've done. I bypassed, by doing all of that bit by bit, I have what seems to me almost a perfect sound.
You know what? I wouldn't add any questions. You gave a very good description, but I want to tell you that yes, it makes sense because also from our experience, the Clarity Cap has a beautiful tonality, but it is relatively, call it mild or thin.
Yes,
and adding this 1 microfarad resistor in parallel might add a bit of a body, while in other capacitors, it can do exactly the opposite. If the capacitors are very dynamic and full body, adding this bypass might take it over the edge and be a little bit kind of irritating when you listen to music. So it's a very thin line to walk on, and congratulations, you went this path.
Well, thank you, Zev. And of course, I would ask you if your clients, your customers love fiddling this way and sort of satisfying their own aesthetics.
Well, I must tell you, we see everything, and there's no one customer that responds like other.
I see.
The diversity is huge. And we also meet people with how to phrase it. I don't want to insult anybody, but sometimes people tell me about the tweaks that they do, and they're very happy. And when I look at it, I say, okay, they probably overcome some physical limitations that they have, like
Of their
hearing.
hearing, huh?
Yeah.
That's interesting. You know, there's a shape-shifting part of your circuit on the crossover where when you switch the wires, it shape shifts the, I think, mid to upper mid. It's how do you describe it in your literature?
Are you
There's
talking about the
two,
jumpers?
no, the jumpers have two positions that affect the smoothness of the
Oh,
mids.
yes. The jumper that you are referring to in the horn, in the Quintet15 horn, is switching between a series topology to parallel topology of the crossover.
Yes.
Now, the frequency response of the crossover in both cases is pretty much equal, but in series, you have like two separate channels. Sorry, in parallel. In the parallel configuration, you have two channels. One channel for the bass, for the low and mids, and one channel for the horn. When you put the jumper on series, basically you connect the two channels and the drivers are in series. So they are on one electronic circuit. And this means that they kind of blend together. They blend together electronically, and you feel that they blend together also acoustically. It's a very gentle or fine kind of difference, but I personally do think that when you manage to, when the series topology works for you, it has a magic because the drivers are kind of blending together. They become
I totally agree with you. And when I remember trying it last year, I was just kind of casually trying it out. I was a bit shocked how much my ear picked up the difference you just described. It really, really attuned it in a very musical way. And I would suggest to any listener, if you haven't done that, to please try that.
Carl, thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing with us your experience. I'm always happy to have musicians using our speakers because you are the guys that you can't cheat with hi-fi tricks. You know how instruments sound.
Thank you so much, Zev.
Yeah. If there's
And
anything,
blessings for all of your listeners as well.
thank you very much, and we'll be in touch for further audio adventures.
Thank you, Zev.
Okay,
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
great.